Hi, this is Phil Lawson, Senior Software Integration Engineer with AppSense, and in the following video I'm going to show you how you can take control of your server estate endpoint security with role-based access using Application Manager and Environment Manager. So that's using Application Manager to further enhance your security with role-based access, and then Environment Manager taking that security one level further, and an optional kiosk mode. So just very briefly on the kiosk mode that I'll be showing towards the end of the video, that's removing the server based desktop experience and just providing a kiosk style mode to the user. This is all linked to a blog with the same title. You'll really need to take a look at another video, which is the group policy side of things, where I'm showing you how to take control of who is logging on as an administrator to your server. So we're currently now in a position, once we've done that, we've implemented it using that guide and video, where the users I'm logging on are members of role-based groups, which you can see on the left-hand side there, within Active Directory. So we've got web admin server-based role. They're logging on as non-admins to the server, and we're providing them with elevated privileges to the applications, consoles and commands they require for their particular role. So let's take a prime example and let's really get into looking at the lockdown now that I've got on a server. So I'm going to take the web admin role as an example. Let's look at the lockdown. So first of all, I'm going to talk through the lockdown that just from logging on as a user provides, and then I'll talk a bit more about the enhancements that Application Manager brings with it. So currently I've not provided this user with elevated privileges to anything that they require for their job function. So if they just try and do something like change the date and time, they're getting prompted with user account control. So anything with this shield against it requires elevation. This user doesn't have the required permissions to elevate. So user account control was introduced in Server 2008 and Vista. Further lockdown, you can see if I try and run an elevator command prompt, again we get the same prompt. If I try and run, let me see, just various things such as create a share, can't do it, require elevation. If I try and log on with a user, create a user, and it's going to say access denied, you're not allowed. Briefly on the groups, you need to visit the longer video I provided on this, but I'm using group policy to implement basically make these groups only members of the administrators group. So it's fixing these groups in so that if I did choose to add someone in there and I was an administrator, it would strip them out when group policy applies. So we've got the built-in admin, which I would recommend you possibly disable that account once you understand the caveats behind that. You've got domain admins, you're always going to want them in there. You've got your server admins or your sysadmins group, and then finally your service accounts. Service accounts, again, using a bit of an enhanced sort of group policy, I've set it to not allow log on locally. So the account can't be used as a backdoor for anyone that knows the password. So they can't use it as a way of elevating themselves. If they do choose to elevate themselves anyway, Application Manager will swoop in and stop them anyway. So when I'm talking about the extended security, that's where Application Manager, that's another piece of the jigsaw that's enhancing the security. All these role-based groups are members of the remote desktop users group, which is again implemented using group policy. And if it was to look in Server Manager, you'll see that obviously we need the remote desktop ability to remote desktop enabled against the server, which should be there by default unless you've taken control of that. Performance Manager I can't create a data collector. Device manager, require administrative privileges. Disk management, don't have the rights. Services, I can't control the services because I'm just a user. And finally, Internet Information Services, insufficient privileges. If I want to try and uninstall some software, it's going to prevent me from doing that. Again, we can use Application Manager to further enhance security for anyone that does somehow get past the user account control. We can stop the uninstall there. So that would be very beneficial for something like antivirus. Again, UAC will block the uninstall of anything that we've not controlled using using Application Manager. So when I'm talking about that very briefly, that's in here, the system controls. So that's how we're controlling and restricting the uninstall of specific items, and just extend that list as you see fit. So let's have a look. If they try and run Server Manager or want to add a role or feature, it's going to block them. If they did get anywhere near that, because they are a user, they won't be able to install a role or feature anyway. You installed updates, but it's not going to let me uninstall that update there. UAC will kick in. So we've got a very good level of security there. You can see I did launch computer management, but you can just choose to block that using Application Manager. Again, control panel, possibly a better way of doing that is to, if you want to block that, is to use the option that you have nulled there. If you want to do that, that's optional, and that option would probably be best added under specific roles, because things like the network admin role will possibly require access to the control panel items that blocks. So before I get into that, I just want to talk about trusted ownership. So this is another piece of the jigsaw, or another enhancement the Application Manager brings with it. So in order to do this demonstration, I'm going to have to give, currently this user doesn't have the ability to run iExplore, so I'm just going to have to give them back the rights to do that in order to do this demonstration. So if a user does want to, I have to save the actual configuration before it will allow me to launch it. So I'm now within iExplore, and if I now try and download some software and execute it, Notepad++ is a good example, just because it's a small download, so it's quick to do. It's a very good piece of software. I'm not in any way, shape or form suggesting it's malware, ransomware. It's probably the best freeware out there on the market, but it's very good for the demo. So this could be an installer or an executable that's from any source. So it could be from a mail someone's sent through. It could be from a network share. It could be from the internet, as I'm showing you now. It could be from any source. It's just I've chosen to do it this way. So you can see the security against this file as I've downloaded it. I am, as the web admin user, the trusted owner against that file. So what is trusted ownership? If we'll have a look at the configuration, you'll see in the trusted owners list we've got groups and users. And if the role-based group is set to restricted, when I choose to execute that file as a user, this list is checked. So you can see you've got the system, you're going to need that there, the built-in administrator, the administrators group there, and trusted installer. So if something's installed via SCCM or LDMS, the permissions against that file are set up as trusted installer. So if I now go and execute this file, you can understand how now, because I'm failing this trusted ownership check, it's going to block me from executing that file. This goes one step further, where even if something is executed, but within it calls a file that fails a trusted ownership check, such as a DLL, it's going to block it as well. It's going to block the execution there. So you can see now how trusted ownership, being the cornerstone of Application Manager, allows you to block the execution of malicious code, ransomware, cryptoware, software you don't want running on your estate. But I'm not going to ruin someone's day by not allowing them to run something I do want them to be able to run. So we can, if we wish, with an application manager, trust the vendor that signed this file, or we can use the digital signature against this file to allow that particular file to run because we know that vendor's okay. But we're not going to compromise the security of our server just so someone can run software on that server. Again, if you're operating with an ITIL framework where change management's in place and you've got a cab and everything's under governance, you may want to just block iExplore as a whole. But you can see how trusted ownership is enhancing the security that bit further than the natural security just logging on as a user provides. So now I've shown you that. How do we give the access back? Well, that's very, very simple. So you can see I've nulled the values there. So CMD, in order to run IIS reset, I have to give that back. I'm going to give them access back to that command. And user rights management, this is so they can run the console using the executable. This is so they can run the IIS console with the MSC. This is so they can get an elevated command prompt just to run IIS reset, not all of a sudden going to give them elevated privileges around the server. And Notepad++, Notepad, and this is for host file changes. Again, optional. I'd strongly suggest using the option within EM to actually do it another way, which is to I'll show you the option. It's an action which you can do a self-heal on the file. So you can actually heal the host file and stop people from actually making changes. But I want to show you that we're not going to ruin the web admin's day if you do want them to be able to amend the host file on the server itself. So now I've given the rights back to the user that's a member of that role. I'll then take you through what they get back, essentially what they're elevated to now do. So the main one we're all looking at is IIS. So what happens now if I run that? It lets me do exactly what I need to do. But if I choose to run Explorer from that, it's not going to all of a sudden let me get privileges around the server. So I have given them back access to cmd.exe, so that's a poor example, but Task Manager is blocked, PowerShell is blocked. So if they choose to circumvent this security and do kind of a loop back to the server and browse to the local host, again, it's not going to all of a sudden let them gain access to that particular executable. But I can perform all the functions there. So if I want to pull in a certificate from the CA, let me see. So if you want to pull in a cert from the CA or create a certificate request, you can do all the functions required to do as that user. Same for IIS. So if I want to do an IIS reset, I can now do that. So globally, apart from the sysadmins, globally no other user can do this, but for the web admin, they're allowed to do it. But for regedit, not allowed to get in there. So I've not all of a sudden exposed myself to this user being able to allow, if they run up a console, they're not all of a sudden given rights to control services just because they're running an elevated command prompt. Same for, let me say, a very good example actually is showing you that if I do a GP result, now if you're an admin, you will get the computer settings, but it still runs as a user. So you can see there, user settings, no computer settings, and this is a very good place to show you that I am logged on and I'm not a member of the built-in administrators group, but I am a member of this role-based group, the web admin server-based role group. Host file is, I will show you that. This is a nice little example of how we can elevate and we can make things easier for the web admin. If they want to do changes to the host file, we can let them in there, make a change, close it, relaunch it, and the change is made. So we're not having to save the file into another location, rename the current one, and then save it back. We can actually elevate them within that particular function. I wouldn't recommend that option. I would strongly advise against and kind of controlling the host's file. But the option's there if you want to do it. But you can still see if I choose to make amendments to the network configuration, for example, it's going to block me from doing that. I can't uninstall software. Let's just do another example. Let's do a network admin. So a network admin might want rights to let's see I'll talk you through this when we're logged on, but we're going to give them access to the Windows firewall side of things, all the network control panels, and all the network-based commands. If there's applications on there that they specifically need, the web admin needs to analyze, we can provide them specifically with access to those applications if required. So let's just show you that I am logged on as a user first. So I'm not a built-in administrator. And you can see there that now if I try and change the date and time, it blocks me. Server manager is going to block me. But if I need to get into the network side of things, I can elevate into those particular functions within there. The same for the Windows firewall. I'm elevating them within there to perform the functions they need within that particular console. Within the elevated command prompt, again, I'm not compromising the security of the server just through elevating the command prompt, but I can give them access to run netstat and btstat and all those commands that they're going to need to perform their function. Same with services as well. If they're run up services, I've done an elevation just so the network admin can control the SNMP trap service. Just that particular service, but they're not given the ability to control any of the other services. And this is such an easy thing to do. I'll show you the role-based group. Once we understand the role, that's how I provided access to the commands, and that is how I provided access to an elevated command prompt, and this is how I provided access to the control panel items, and then the Windows firewall there. That's how I provide access to the SNMP trap service. So this is very easy for anyone to do. You know, it's once you understand the role, you speak to the person, you can then give them back or the rights they need to perform that function. So let's just log off there. So how do we take this one step further? So let's talk about the kiosk mode that I briefly touched on at the start of the video. The kiosk mode, we know Microsoft introduced the idea of a non-desktop experience in Server 2016. I don't think that's going to be that popular, so this allows you to achieve a halfway house where you can still log the sysadmin on, they get the desktop experience, but your role-based users are logged on in a kiosk style mode. So let me just show you what that looks like first before we get into how I've done that using Environment Manager. So I'm going to take a role that I'm very familiar with as an AppSense admin. So we'll log on as Absence admin. It's telling me that you've been logged on in server kiosk mode. Press Control Alt N to lock the session, change your password or log off. I OK that, and then thrown into the session, and all the consoles and applications you can see for my role are launching, and launching very quickly as well, because we're not having to load the desktop shell. So I'm just going to minimize all those windows. You can see what it looks like behind there. So I get a black desktop, and I get all the consoles and applications where the taskbar would normally be for my job role. If I was to accidentally close one of those, I'm not going to have to log on, log off, and log back in. Environment Manager is going to handle that for me and bounce it back up. So let's just focus on IIS. You can actually choose to block Explorer if you wish. So we know from there we're in an elevated elevated console. You can choose to block Explorer if you want, and they will still have the ability to import certificates. But I don't see that as necessary really, because all the items I want to block are being blocked, and the fact they're still logged on as a non-admin, again, you're getting all that enhanced security behind that. As the Absence admin, I'm still have the ability to run an IIS reset against the website. But it's not all of a sudden going to let me run things that we don't want them to be able to run for that particular job role. Within services, for example, I've provided myself with the access to control the absence-based services, the deployment services that I'm going to use to deploy configs and applications around my estates. That's quite an important service. So if that is stopped or there's a problem with it, I can go in and restart that. But I'm not all of a sudden given the access to control any of the other services on the actual server. Got access to the Performance Manager console, Environment Manager console, and this is all in an elevated form. Also got access to the web, and we can see if I was to run going onto the Absence website and wanted to run something that was signed by Absence, I could actually execute that if I wish, and I'll just show you briefly within the within the role how that would happen. I've just said anything star.star vendor built-in elevate, so anything that's signed by us Absence, I'm allowing them to do a built-in elevate, but trusted ownership will swoop in on anything else that's not signed and block the execution of that. So again, if you're operating with a change management framework, that's an optional thing. I'd probably recommend against doing that if you are wanted to take a tight control. But I want to show you that as an Absence admin, I'm not taking anything away from them that they would normally need to do on the server. I won't do that because it will take a while to actually sort of demo that. But that's how things work from that perspective. So let's see, if I do a Control-Alt-Delete-N, you see there that the option Task Manager and the option to restart and shut down are not there. And I'm just going to also show you thinking about things. If someone wants to do a shutdown -R, they will be able to launch the console. We could probably actually prevent that from being launched, but using Application Manager. But if they did get in there and wanted to try and attempt to shut down the server, it's going to deny them access, even though we're elevating the command prompt. So you can see how we're in a very in a piecemeal way. I'm giving them the access they need to perform their job role, and it's not taking me much effort to do that. So let's log this user off now. And I'm just going to briefly, I'm going to go through the configurations. So if you're still with me and you like what you see, stick with me, and I'll show you the environment manager configuration that I've used to the kiosk mode and the application manager configuration in more detail. So let's have a look at the kiosk style mode now. So kiosk lockdown, how did I remove the task manager side of things and the shutdown? Dead easy. And this is a kind of a global lockdown that we're going to apply to anyone logging on within those role-based groups. Once we're in there, we can then enhance the security. We can, for specific job roles, we can set specific things up against those job roles. And the really good thing here is that you can see it's going in a pre-session. The user's not going to have to log on in order for group policy to apply and log off. It's there pre-launch. That's a really good security feature their first time they log on. We're controlling the shell side of things using the custom user interface, and we're using commands, VB scripts for particular job functions. How are those VB scripts put in place? Well, they're put in place using the EM config as well. So you can see there how we can extend this list for various job roles. So it's just a case of copying the node and pasting it. So for the web admin role, if they remember that group and we detect that the IIS shell VBS is not there, then we create the VBS script that's required. And this might look a little bit daunting, but it's not. You can copy this, and the only lines you're changing are this one here, and that's in order to launch the executables we require for that particular job function. So executables or applications. So that can just be extended for that particular function. So you just copy, paste for it. And that puts in place the script file required for the to change. So we're not launching the Explorer shell or the desktop experience, but we're just launching those particular items and then elevating them. So it's a self-contained thing. Once deployed, it's self-contained. We're not having to do anything around this. It's all within the actual configuration itself. How the logon messages are handled here. So if it's RDP, I've got control alt delete end, nice little condition there. And if it's console session, we change it to control alt delete, just to alert them to the fact that they're logged on in a kiosk style mode. How we're healing things, very simple. If we detect that the process inet mgr, which is the IIS process of the console, it stops, we relaunch it. Very simple, and we just extend that list. So it's an easy framework just to extend. Put further checks in there so that if someone was to log on and they're just a standard user and they're a non-admin, we can put a further check in there that will bounce them off the server or log them off if they do get to the point of actually getting to the desktop, which would be unlikely. There'd have to be a member of either the remote desktop users group or the administrators group to gain a session on the server. But we can put safeguards there if you wish. So let's get on to the application manager config. So you can see there I've got the default global prohibited list, which is applied to every role-based group. So we've got cmd.exe in there, regedit, server manager, task manager, etc, etc, etc. Built-in administrators are unrestricted, so your IT sysadmins are okay. Everyone else is restricted, and then we're getting into these role-based groups where we've got the default prohibited against there, so that default prohibited group is applied there. We can further enhance that by using a kiosk prohibit. So if I wanted to block iExplore within kiosk mode, I could just take that group and again just apply it there. I didn't for the purposes of the demonstration, but the option's there if you wish. If you want to give access back, as you've seen, I've been able to then give them cmd.exe, iExplore, and IISReset for that particular job function. User rights, again, you've seen how I've been able to give them access to the consoles and applications they require for the job function, and if we wish, we can allow them elevated privileges to do an install of an assigned AppSense file or installer. How we're allowing them to control AppSense-based services on the server if we wish, and the trusted ownership side of things. So now we know that they're in a restricted group and they're logging on as a non-admin, so we've got the layered security there, the user access control. But if they do bypass the user access control, Application Manager is then there to further secure. So trusted ownership and the default prohibited. So the trusted ownership side, in checking the trusted owner against a file that's been executed or being called by an executable, and checking the trusted ownership security against it. If it fails, we block access. Again, the default prohibited that you've seen is the further enhancement of the security on the server, and it's very easy to do. Once you've set this up, you just extend the list, so we can put a SQL admin in there. How that would look is you'd provide access to all the SQL consoles. SQL consoles in there, and all the SQL-based services if you wish, and also obviously any commands that they require. So that's very detailed, but hopefully from there you can see how we're implementing a role-based access sort of framework to your server state using Application Manager and Environment Manager, and getting very tight security on the server, preventing the unwanted execution of installers, and further enhancing that with the sort of the ransomware and the cryptoware, stopping the execution of that on the server. And the Environment Manager, you've got the Kiosk Mode, which again further enhances the security. Very easy to implement. It's very easy to deploy these configurations and the AppSense agents around the server estate. With the AMC, you just specify the OU, deploy the configs and agents, and let me just see if there's anything else I should mention. So this all links into the blog and guides and the background on the blog that you'll see, with a similar sort of title based on the server endpoint security and the role-based access. On there I will provide further detail and a further video on how to take control of who is and isn't logging on to your server as an administrator. So we're getting into a position where we are just logging these users on within role-based access groups as non-admins. So I'll show you how to get to that position, and then you can see in front of you from this extended video the configuration and that you'd need in order to implement this role-based access framework. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. I've been Phil Lawson, and thanks very much for watching.